Hello everyone, I am Akhilesh and I will be talking about active learning, a concept in machine learning. So let us say that you have a lot of data to label and you want to do a machine learning algorithm on a big amount of data, but you don't have any label data. You have a very small amount or no label data and labeling each sample is very expensive. So what will you do now? So that is what active learning is about. It is a concept which you can use to label data optimally and still get good results after labeling less data. Now let us look at what active learning is. So the key idea behind active learning is that a machine learning algorithm can perform better with less training if it is allowed to choose the data on its own. This was said in an active learning survey by Settles, and basically what they mean is the machine learning algorithm itself should choose what data to label so that it can perform optimally. So it will choose the best data so that it can get the results fast and good with very less amount of labeling. Now, the steps in active learning are: first, the model is trained on the labeled data, whatever small amount of labeled data is. Then it is evaluated on the unlabeled samples. And based on this evaluation, it chooses the best samples to label, best unlabeled samples to label so that it can increase its labeled data size. When all these are added to the labeled data, the training data size increases. It retrains and continues the process over time so that it can slowly increase the trained data, but the main objective being it can get a good performance with less amount of data labeling. An important component here is an oracle. An oracle is a person or something that knows the correct answer or the correct classification to all the samples or the correct answer to all the questions and queries. Practically, an oracle is an expert in that field or would be an algorithm, but it would be expensive to run the algorithm or to consult the person. Thus, we are using active learning to reduce the number of labeling needed. So active learning, the process can be done in different ways. So let us look at these different ways. They are basically called scenarios: membership query synthesis, pool-based sampling, and stream-based selective sampling. So membership query synthesis, the learner creates a distribution of the existing data. Now, what is a distribution? So a distribution is basically this. You have a probability for each number. So you have all the possible numbers 0 to 10 and a probability for all these. So over here the probability of getting a 5 may be around 0.3 and probability of getting a 4 may be around 0.2 or 0.25. Similarly for 6, 0.2, 0.25, something like that. And maybe here it's 0.1 or 0.05. So there's a 50% chance, like there's a 30% chance you get a 5, like 20% chance you get a 4, 20% chance you get a 6, and so on. And from this kind of a distribution, it'll keep generating data, and from this, it'll the data that it generates, it'll give it to the oracle to predict. And this predicted sample will be taken and it will be added to the label data, and thus the label data size will increase, and it can also choose the best good amount, like good kind of data to label. And this distribution will also keep changing over time based on the new labeled samples. So I'll just come to that in a little. Next one is pool based sampling. So there's a pool of unlabeled samples, and each of them is given an informativeness score. So either the entire pool will be given, like all samples in the pool, or a subset if the pool is very large. And the most informative samples are taken. So let us look at that now. Let us say that this is the true classification for everything, but we don't really know that because all these are unlabeled. And we take some samples at random, label them. We see that some are green and some are red. So when we do this, now when we do the machine learning training, we see that okay, this is the line on which decides whether it is a red sample or a blue sample. Now, what will be very informative? If we take this, is there any use? Then there's not much use because this is most probably green. So we would mostly be taking something near this line, because again, if we take something deep in the red area, it'll again most probably be red. So we'll take something on near this line. So these are very informative. So all the dots you see here, all the blue dots, they are all unlabeled samples very close to the boundary, and they will be very informative because if we can label this one, for example, and it becomes a green, then the line orientation itself will change completely. So this would be considered a very informative sample in this case. So in the pool-based sampling, an informative score is assigned to all labels, all samples in the pool, and either the most informative sample or the most informative few samples, probably 5 samples or probably 10 samples will be taken, and these will be added to the labeled set. So let's say initially you have only 10 labeled samples, and there are probably 10,000 unlabeled samples, and in your first iteration after you do the training, you choose 10 of the most informative ones, you label all of them, so it'll become 20 labeled samples. You create a new model based on that, get a new boundary along which you can say one side is green, one side is red, and then you can say, okay, now you look at the next set of samples which are most informative, and you keep going on. Probably you'll do till 100 or 200, and you will already get a very good model at that time. So you see that the total number of samples is actually 10,000, but you can do well with even 200 samples. So I'll show an example at the end, an actual example which I had performed. Now going ahead, let us look at the third kind of strategy or scenario, stream-based selective sampling. So over here, generally we assume that getting an unlabeled sample is free, and the samples are taken one by one. So last time we saw that the samples are taken as an entire pool, and all of them are the informativeness is looked at for all of them. Over here, the sample will be taken for each sample will be taken one by one, and the information score will be generated for that particular sample, and based on that score, it will be decided whether that should be labeled or not. And once it is labeled, it will be added to the pool, and again the model will be updated based on that, so that a new boundary can be created. So for example, over here, let's say that the information score goes from 0 to 1 somewhere, and this will probably have an information near 0, maybe 0.01 or 0.001. This will have, I don't know, 0.04 or something, and this will have like 0.07, 0.08, 0.09. So if you keep the threshold as 0.08, then many samples over here will have high informativeness, and like based on that threshold, many of these will get labeled then. Many of these will be classified as, okay, these have to be labeled, and they'll all get labeled. And over here you see that there are not so many ones which are close to the border here, because many have actually been labeled well. So there are not so many which have actually been there are not too many unlabeled samples here, so many of them will have a lower information value, and because of that not many will actually get labeled, and you can see that you are getting a good model already here. Now the query strategies. So how do you find the most informative sample or most informative samples? That is what this is all about. There are three main strategies that are used: the least confidence strategy, the margin sampling, and the entropy sampling. So now when we look at these three strategies, the least confidence strategy, for example, you look at the sample for which the most likely label has lowest probability. That is, let us look at an example. There's a sample S1 and a sample S2. For S1, and yeah, there are three classes A, B, and C. S1 has probability 0.5 for A, 0.25 for B, 0.25 for C. So you can see most likely is A. Okay, so most likely sample is A with a probability 0.5. Similarly for S2, it is A has 0.1, B has 0.8, and C has 0.1 again. Most likely label is B, and it has a probability 8. You can see that the most likely label, for that the probability is low for sample 1, S1. So over here you can see that if we actually label this, we can get a lot of information. That is, because it is uncertain, if we label this, we'll know whether it is actually A or is it B or is it C. So this is actually a very good case for labeling, but over here we know that it is mostly B itself. So we do not get much benefit of labeling this one since it is mostly B. So in this case, A has a better, it is better to label sample 1 than to label sample 2. So this is sample 1 and sample 2. So it's better to label this one rather than this one. So this is the least confidence one. So you're least confident about sample 1. So you're doing it directly. Now the next one is margin sampling. Now in this, it looks at the difference between the most likely label and the second most likely. That is, basically the model cannot decide which one to label. So let us look at an example again. So S1 has probabilities 0.5 for A, 0.45 for B, 0.05 for C. So over here, A is most likely, B is second most likely, and both are very close. So it is very hard to decide which one it actually is. You can understand, right? For this one, like if you look at the previous one, least confidence, in S2 you can see that it's 0.3, 0.4, 0.3. So most likely one is A with 0.5, most likely is B with 0.4. So if you go with least confidence, you will label S2. But if you go with margin sampling, you see that difference here is just 0.05. So difference is very low. That means it is very close and it's really hard for it to decide which one it actually is. But in case of this one, the difference between most likely and second most likely is 0.1, which is more than that. So it has some more confidence. It can still discern, okay, it is more of B than of A. But over here, it's like, since it's very close, it's like it cannot decide very well which one is it, which one is it. So it keeps struggling to decide. In this, it's not struggling that much. But overall, it has less confidence, but still it's not struggling that much. So in this case, it will label sample S1. But if you use least confidence, the previous method, we will be using this one. So the main advantage of this is it looks at probabilities of not just the most likely label, but the others as well. Now the entropy sampling. Least confidence, the one we saw first, takes account only the first one. Margin sampling takes account only the top two. Entropy sampling basically uses all possible labels, and it is done using a metric called entropy. And this entropy metric, basically using this metric, this will actually look at all the probabilities of all the labels, and the entropy will be taken here. And that's the main thing here. Instead of just looking at one, or instead of just looking at two, it looks at all of them. In different cases, different ones are useful, and this is used quite often. So looking back, let us look at the steps again. So we first train the model. We evaluate the model on all the unlabeled samples, or sometimes a subset. Based on the evaluation, we choose one sample or a list of samples to be labeled. Yeah, again, this we saw it can be chosen using the information properties. That is the least confidence, or the margin sampling, or the entropy sampling. So there are some others as well, but this is the main thing. And then these are added to the label data, and they are again repeated till a good condition is achieved. So that stopping condition, that is basically decided by the people who are performing this. They generally divide the training set into two parts, and one part will be used for the major training, the other would be used for performance evaluation. So based on that final performance evaluation, they may stop, or based on the number of samples they have labeled totally, they stop. And that is the main thing that they are looking at. So what are some advantages? If they have already decided that, okay, I'm going to label only 30 samples, if they choose 30 samples at random, you may either get this or you may get this. So you can see that this is actually not a good border. You can see that this would be a almost straight line would be the actual boundary between green and red. And so this kind of random choosing is actually good, but this kind of a random choosing is not so good. In active learning, you will mostly end up with something like this, because many of these are very close to the boundary, and this is what will happen in active learning. Active learning is quite good. So in a random case, you will mostly not end up with this, because quite often you may end up with too many green samples also, which is not at all a good thing. So the main things are, it basically eases the problem of less amount of labeled data, and only a fraction of the data has to be labeled. It can even be applied for online learning scenarios, and many practical scenarios in industries involve online learning. Some applications are natural language processing. A lot of data has to be labeled, and it's also quite difficult to label them. So some tasks like parts of speech tagging are done using active learning. And yes, NLP is a very common aspect where this is used. And reinforcement learning is something like active learning, but not exactly, but you could probably say it is. Online learning also, it is basically like it can actually use active learning, because a lot of data keeps coming continuously. So you have to choose which data to label. So in that case, you will look at your existing model, see, okay, fine, which data will I label, and then you will label that. So for example, spam filters. Only some of the emails are marked as spam or marked as not spam by the users, And based on these, the algorithm has to understand, okay, which email is spam, which is not spam. And over time, the user of that email may actually mark more and more as spam and not spam, and you can update it based on that. You can even ask the user, is this spam, is this not spam, depending on what is uncertain for you. And similarly, it happens with search results, which update dynamically, job listings. So many things that update dynamically, and many other factors are involved. Like online learning is that example. And there's a lot of data. Active learning is used in these cases. Now let us look at some active learning visualizations. So I had created these visualizations for a better understanding of active learning. Now there's a data set called the iris dataset. It has 3 subspecies of the iris flower, the versicolor, virginica, and the setosa. And I have taken 2 of them because these two actually give a good representation in some of the attributes. The attributes I've taken are the petal length in centimeters and the petal width in centimeters. So now if you look at this, you can see clearly that there's quite a good demarcation between these. It's mostly a line that comes over here, which is separating them. Now, if we use active learning, let us see what happens here. I have taken the SVM model, support vector machines, which is a machine learning model, and 10 points initially. And the rest of the points are unlabeled points. There are totally 100 points, so 10 of them are labeled, and the rest 90 are unlabeled. The green line represents the best fit line if all points are labeled. Now you can see that these dark points, the black points, are actually the unlabeled points, and the points that are colored, those are the ones which have been randomly taken and labeled. So now you can see that there are 6 red points that are labeled and 4 cyan points that are labeled, and based on this we get this line. The most uncertain point has to be taken so that it gets a good model the next time, and this will keep continuing, and that's what has been done. So let us look at what the most uncertain point has been taken. So this is the one. Ideally, when you're doing it in a practical scenario, you should do it based on the purple line. So this will give the result because you don't know this green line yet. Over here I've just taken the green line for simplicity so that it can be maintained everywhere, but ideally you should be taking the purple line. So either this or this would have been the most uncertain point, but over here I've taken everything with respect to the green line, which like you should technically not do in the actual thing. So I've got this one. And next you see I have taken this as the green line. You can see that this has been labeled, and based on that now this is the next closest point, and this has come even a little closer. This is the next one. So you can see that if you take one line and look at the most uncertain points, you will always take all the points very close to it, and you get a better fit line after all this. Now you can see that this line is coming more closer and closer to the green line, and this is the 4th iteration. You take this one. Yes, 5th iteration is also the one next to that, you can see. Now when we look at a big visualization, initially it comes close. This is a 20 iteration run, and it goes far slowly because it starts labeling many points on this side. Now when it's coming back, you can see that over time it's slowly coming back to the original line. So ultimately the fit is quite good. So moving ahead, I have actually made a tutorial on active learning, tutorial with code, and it is the one which I've used for generating this visualization. You can check it out on Medium. It is a Medium article that has been published on the Towards Data Science, which is a smaller part of Medium. You can use this link to check out the link. Check out the article. It has a detailed explanation of the entire code and the entire workflow. You can check it out over there. I have added this link in the description. There are some other references that you may want to check out. The DataCamp article here and the Wikipedia article. So these were also the ones that I mainly referred to, and I have also referred to an active learning survey, the one that I mentioned earlier. Even that is a quite good one. That is a more in-depth and long PDF. So you can check that for more details. I have added that also in the link. Thank you. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe and put the bell icon for more notifications. Thank you.